What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here with you guys as always. And today, we only have three practices here from Latrobe left, if you believe it or not. Tomorrow's going to be more of probably a game planning, kind of like game planning practice rather than a competitive team practice, just 2 days before their game down in Jacksonville. So let's talk about today, some things we are learning about this team, and really where I want to start is the offensive side of the ball because earlier this week I asked the question of can these wide receivers get on the same page as Aaron Rodgers? Because I thought that was a really important question in the context of what we had seen with him and Roman Wilson, with him and DK Metcalf, those guys just being off the ball every now and then. And so when they came out this week and yesterday had an encouraging day, I was willing to say maybe this is the start of something. Maybe it's turning a corner. Here's the whole thing. No Jalen Ramsey, no Darius Slay, no Joey Porter Jr., no Alex Highsmith. So I want to say that. So you don't want to kind of overreact to anything. But things that are looking up, I'll say that. Things have the wheels are in motion, I think, for positivity here around the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they have going on offense. It seems like what DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers have has started to click over the past week or so. They really seem to have a growing connection in the red area. I think it's really popped. I also think when you look at how Rodgers and Roman Wilson have actually built a rapport over the last 2 days. That's been really encouraging. And Aaron Rodgers talked today about you kind of getting in there with Roman and trying to make him a little more free. He felt like he was playing kind of tight because um, he wanted to, Aaron Rodgers' approval basically. And Rodgers didn't want him seeking that, although obviously there is a ton of motivation for Roman Wilson to be a guy for Aaron Rodgers. And so the Steelers really focused on those two guys, and it seems like that rapport is coming along nicely. I think Roman Wilson had 5 or 6 grabs today from Aaron Rodgers. So good stuff on that front. I think the chemistry between Rodgers and those two receivers is finally clicking. Calvin Austin's been out with an injury. So naturally, Roman Wilson's just had a lot of chances, and it seems like that's coming along. I already think Rodgers and the tight ends kind of have a bit of a natural feel with one another. I don't think him and Frymuth and him and Jonnu are going to take very long to get together. In fact, I think they've kind of been going with each other. But I like that the Rodgers to Metcalf, Rodgers to Wilson connection seems to be starting to build. It seems like Roman Wilson is starting to kind of pick up on what Aaron Rodgers is selling, and I think that's a positive right out of the gate. So this offense has looked naturally better than it had previously, and so I do think there are positives to take away from that. Now, I do think you don't want to overreact from it because the defense is a little banged up. They're down some players. You're not facing the first team. So, okay, I understand that. But on the other flip side, you needed to see some positivity from this offense and something to grow upon. And I think we're seeing that. And so let's see how it continues. The screen game was even working today, for goodness sakes. Things are working. This was one of the offense's best practices. The last 2 days have naturally been some of the offense's best practices. And it does take offenses a little longer to get moving than defenses. So maybe it's just the offense starting to kind of come together and turn the bend. Let's see. No pads today, so I don't really want to talk about D line or O line, aside from YA Black, who had another really good practice, just getting his paws up. When the pad's been on, this guy's been a vortex of a run stuffer. He's having a great camp for a fifth round pick. I mean, this guy is showing out. He's got first team reps today. I think we're looking at a guy that's going to have some serious rotational upside for the Steelers, and is a guy that's going to play a significant amount. He's definitely one of those players I'm excited to see play Saturday down in Jacksonville because I think he could be a fun watch when the pads go on. And you also just want to see, how does he handle, pad level because sometimes his pad level could swell. There was one rep in camp where he just got buried because he popped straight up. But if that pad level was being fixed, that could turn him into a pretty solid player that you could look at. So let's see how Wyatt Black plays. But on the O line, I did want to kind of address something that I hadn't addressed yesterday or Monday. And that's, I think, Broderick Jones, at least the last 2 days in pads that they were in pads, started to have a few nice days. So I thought that was a positive for him. He just needs to have some consistency in his game. He's been such a roller coaster of his career, and not just from game to game. I'm talking snap to snap. The issue that when I always talk with people around the Steelers organization is Broderick Jones is able to do all the technique things at certain points. It's putting everything together on a given rep. Sometimes his feet are bad. Sometimes he ducks his head. He's a bit of a waist bender. So that can be a bit of a trouble when you kind of get caught leaning too much, and you can obviously become susceptible to some moves there if you're off balance. His hands can sometimes get wide, but sometimes, it's just one of those that's the issue. And most of the time that is. You have the hands that are really great, and then you have a great pad level, but then the feet are maybe too narrow, and you're going to get, overpowered and things like that. Or you got great feet, you got great hands. The pad level's not too bad, but oh, you overset. Now your inside hip is open. It just seems like there's little things every single rep that keep popping up for him. But I thought over the last 2 days, Sunday and Tuesday when they were in pads, we finally started to see Broderick Jones gain a little confidence. I thought in the run game, especially, he popped. I think that's where he's going to gain confidence. The pass pro stuff, it's going to be, I think, a little bit of an adventure. I think he's still a little raw technically, but if he can become even an average pass protector this year, I think that's a win considering where he is starting. Um, but he in the run game, I think he's been clearing some lanes. I think that is as big of a positive as you could possibly get with Broderick Jones right now. And that's kind of where he's at. And so he had some nice, really good reps against Alex Highsmith, some really good reps against Nick Herbig. I think, he gets tested every day. And so I thought it was just really positive to see some good signs from him. I'm still skeptical of Broderick Jones. I think anyone that rightfully has watched the tape last year is a little bit skeptical, but you got to start somewhere. Hopefully, these 2 days for him are the start of an uptick in what he can do. So let's see how all of that kind of puts itself together and where it goes from there. One thing I do think that is becoming rather apparent kind of quickly is that there are some intriguing depth options along this offensive line. I do think you look at guys like Dylan Cook. I think he's a fun little player that can play 4 different spots. Stephen Jones has had a decent camp. Um, I like Ryan McCollum as a swing interior guy. So there are some interesting players I'm actually excited to look at when we see them play on Saturday. So there are some depth pieces here on this offensive line that I'm intrigued by, and not every team has good depth along their offensive line. The Steelers had probably better depth last year, but I think there are at least some pieces here that maybe we just don't know about yet that could be something. So let's see how that emerges. The other thing that I've just been impressed by, I think the transformation of the corner room has not just been at the top. Obviously, Ramsey and Slay are very legit. But I do think when we see guys like Brandon Eccles out there, you really see the change. Eccles is a guy that competes. He's a little bit of a sloppy tackler. He competes as a tackler, but sometimes the play strength isn't necessarily there to be a great wrap up tackler. But you see how sticky he is in coverage, how good of a gunner he is, and how detail oriented he is at playing different spots. So I think right now he's probably the in-house favorite to be the dime backer. And I do really enjoy watching Brandon Eccles play because he's a smart, heady player that can play slot, both outside spots. You could put him in anywhere where there's an injury, and then he can be a sub package piece while also being a special teams core player. That's a guy that condenses multiple roles, and that's what you need in your backup players. He's quality depth at the actual position while also being a really good teamer. He's the type of signing that when you make it for $3 million, you're saying, "Hey, man, we signed this guy for 2 years. And he is at a cheap contract, and he's going to be a legitimately valuable piece on the margins. And that's the type of signing good teams make. And I think Brandon Echols has been a really, really nice standout here at training camp. So a good bit of positives here heading into the first game. Obviously, no Will Howard. I think that one's going to be a little bit of a bummer just to not see Will Howard out there. Just getting tape to learn from, getting live reps to see what he's like in a stadium, I think is naturally a little different. And the fact that he's also probably going to miss next week's joint practice. Aaron Rodgers, for example, was saying how joint practices are more valuable than preseason games because you get to see more, you get to see more different pictures. Defenses will do more things rather than playing vanilla. So I do think that is going to be something that's a bit of a bummer. You're just going to miss, I think, a lot of valuable reps, a lot of valuable time with him out with that broken bone in his hand. So we'll see how all of that goes. They probably will sign somebody, I imagine, before their game, because Howard is still banged up and won't be back for potentially as much as 3 weeks per reports. So he might miss the whole preseason. And if that happens, that's just a real bummer for the Steelers. Not just for fan view watching, if you're kind of excited to see him, but also just for the fact that you don't get to see the film on Will Howard when you really wanted to see that. And I think that was something that they were looking forward to seeing, and he was looking forward to having out here in this preseason. All right, folks, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will be back tomorrow.